The Fruit Tree by Kate Looney. He picked the fruit carefully, not only in the selection, but also in the method, not wanting to harm his precious tree. He looked for several minutes, not wanting to pick anything but the best his tree had to give him. It was a lot of work to get fruit like this. He didn't want to waste a piece that wasn't quite ripe. Reaching up, he almost needed a ladder to reach his choice, but on his tiptoes he was just able to get his fingers around the perfect piece, blood red, bowing the branch ever so slightly. He gave it a gentle half-turn, and it fell willingly into his hand. It was almost too beautiful to eat. If it were any more polished, he'd be able to see his reflection in the glistening skin. In time, each budding fruit on his divine tree would be this exquisite, but tonight was a night for this piece in particular, and this piece alone. He carried it tenderly back into the house, ready to begin his ritual. The room had to be as impeccable as the fruit was. Perfectly clean, it held a space right in the middle, a space for him. A table to hold a magnificent feast, but there was only one course and only one guest, at least for now. A plate and a knife lay before him. He began to cut the fruit into pieces, eating each one as it came, letting the bloody juice drip down his chin, unwilling to spare the time to wipe it away as he consumed its flesh, carefully, but quickly, or else it wouldn't work quite right. Soon the fruit was gone, skin and seeds being the only indicators of its existence, and the blood, of course, all over his hands, his face, his tablecloth. But there was no time to fuss over that now. His guests were arriving. His mother arrived first, as she often did, smiling at him from the other end of the table. She didn't speak. His guests never did, but he felt her energy wash over him, a warmth that brought back memories of his childhood. He felt his stomach dropped as she pushed him back and forth on a swing. He smelled spaghetti, a favorite meal he would share with her after she returned from a long day of work. Happiness swelled in his heart as her hand squeezed his in the memory, all the while the echo of laughter ringing in his ears as she smiled at him from across the table. Next came his first-grade teacher, bringing along with her the smell of chalk, the sound of chairs squeaking against linoleum, the pride that came with finishing a book or a test, or a collage of pictures cut from magazines. She took her seat next to his mother, bringing with her all of the joy that came with his earliest memories of learning. A quick jump in time, and his high school baseball coach was joining them all at the table, carrying with him the crack of a bat as it hit what was sure to be a home run. The sensation of putting on a pair of cleats he had worn so many times before that felt uncannily like coming home. The sun on his face as he stood in the outfield, hearing the voice of his coach and knowing that the game was in good hands. The guests were arriving in earnest now, not giving him enough time to properly address all of them. This didn't worry him, though. He just sat back and let their gifts wash over him. The sights, smells, sounds, tastes, and feelings overcame him as everything else melted away. His English professor, his aunt, the woman at the diner who would have his order sent to the kitchen as soon as he walked in the door, his childhood piano instructor, the little girl he used to tutor, his old guidance counselor. They each brought with them specific memories and feelings, all distinct, but the same, as they brought him back to older times which were too precious to forget. They faded away slowly, but sooner than he would have liked, he was alone at the table again. He didn't want to let go of the high, but he knew he had to. As much as he liked to revel in these gifts, he had prior engagements tonight. He checked the clock on the wall before reluctantly getting up from the table. He couldn't afford to be late, not for a night as special as this one. He was already dressed. He'd be ready to go meet his beloved soon. He just needed to grab a few things. The flowers from the table and the picnic basket. The high had worn off enough at this point to allow for other feelings to come through, and excitement filled his stomach. Tonight would be instrumental for the rest of his life going forward. He almost forgot the most important piece as he left the house, but he remembered just before he opened the door to leave. He smiled as he felt the comfortable bulge in his pocket, the item that would allow him to make this so vital next step. And what better night to do it than their anniversary? The meadow was secluded. It was their spot. It was located far enough from society to ensure privacy, and the trees were thin enough to allow for stargazing. But the stars weren't out yet, and the sunset cast a golden glow over the whole forest. They met and embraced, sharing the passion that came not only from loving, but also truly knowing one another. They spread a blanket out on the grass and began to pull items from the picnic basket. Fruit, wine, bread, cheese, chocolate. Tonight was a night for romance. He thought back to when they had first met. He'd always fancied himself as too busy for romance. His life was full enough as it was, and he didn't see what could be gained by putting his heart on the line. But of course it would only take one person to change his mind. With their meeting came brand new feelings, not only romance but dependence, devotion, and lust. These feelings were precious to him. The wine dwindled faster than anything else, and they soon forgot about the rest of the food as they became wrapped up in each other. It would be easy to stay like this all night, both of them tied together by passion, but as the sun set on the two lovers, he knew he had to complete the task he'd set out to do tonight. He reluctantly untangled himself so they were facing each other. It was hard to find the words, but he let them fall from his mouth without thinking, knowing that his love would ensure that his message got across. "You are so precious to me," he said. "And since meeting you, I've learned so much about myself, not only about who I am as a partner, but also about who I am as an individual. Truly, you have changed me for the better." He paused briefly, unsure how to proceed. "And the memories we've made together, these feelings, are something I want to keep with me for the rest of my life." He reached for his back pocket, where the comfortable weight still sat. "I'm sorry." The mood changed abruptly and tangibly as he pulled out the weapon. "But these are feelings I can't afford to lose." He did his best to clean up the body. With all of his experience, he knew it had been nearly painless, but that didn't stop the blood from flowing and staining the shirt and pants. He carefully stripped the body, wiping away the blood, being careful not to damage it any further. He then dressed it in the clothes he had so often seen before. They'd been left at his house, and he couldn't help but smile as he looked at the familiar outfit, embracing the memories that came with it. He carried the body to the base of his tree, letting it rest under the boughs as he began to dig. He had marked the place carefully so as not to disturb any of the other friends who slept there. Much like the act itself, the digging was unpleasant, but again, with the experience came ease, and the grave was finished before the sun rose. It shone down upon him in his tree, peeking out from over the hills just as he lay the body in the grave. There was beauty there, even in death. The familiar lips that had so often met his own, the gentle curve that connected the shoulder to the neck. He remembered vividly the feeling of blood flowing there, life flowing through what was now only a corpse. In the fresh sunlight of the morning, the body was pale, only pink where the blood hadn't quite been washed away. But he remembered how it had been in life, and smiled at the memories and the feelings they brought to him. He began to replace the dirt into the grave, slowly covering the body one shovelful at a time until none of his love could be seen at all. But he did not weep. After all, they would meet again soon. After the final bit of dirt had been patted back into place, he allowed his gaze to lift back up to his beloved tree. He looked longingly at the unripe fruit, wishing against reason that another piece would be ready for him now. But he knew he must have patience, and now more than ever, if he could be patient, he would be rewarded handsomely. The next days passed slowly. He rose with the dawn and tended to his tree. He gave it everything it could possibly need, protecting it from any harm he had the power to contradict. In the afternoons, he would nap at its base, sleeping peacefully next to the fresh grave. When it would storm, he suffered with the tree, feeling every cold wind and snapping branch as if it were his own body outside, being subjected to the elements. With each passing day, he grew more and more despondent, though. The woods never felt more lonely than when he was waiting for the fruit to ripen. He missed his love, remembering in the past when they would pass the time together, making the deep low before his precious high almost manageable. But even then, the feeling had always stayed in the back of his mind. The desperation for the fruit and the doubt that grew with every passing day. He feared what would happen if he no longer had his hallowed tree. He didn't allow these feelings to overcome him, though, and however slowly the days did pass, and just as every time before, his patience was rewarded. One day, once the fresh, new grave was once again covered in grass, he spotted it, a perfect red fruit, almost out of reach, but not quite. He felt the tree's heart beat along with his own as he pressed one hand against its trunk, stretching up with the other to grasp the delicate fruit. Just as he had before, he carried it delicately into the house, ready to begin the ritual. Almost. It took all of his self-control not to begin immediately, but he made himself wait, letting go of the pristine red fruit and letting it set on his lone plate as he went to go get ready. He tried his best not to rush as he showered, washing his hair and even putting on cologne. He donned a nice outfit, one of the few things he owned that wasn't torn-up jeans or old t-shirts. Usually he wouldn't put this much effort into his appearance, but today was special. After what felt like hours, he was finally ready to begin. Again, he cut open the fruit, letting the blood flow freely as he tasted the sweet flesh on his tongue. He acknowledged each guest as they came and the gifts they brought with them. The scent of grass, pencil shavings, old books, black coffee, the feelings of peace, happiness, love, and hope. The sound of laughter, music, bustling crowds, and rainfall. He felt and loved each one of his guests, and he cherished their time together, but he waited for one in particular. One he knew would be coming today. Soon enough, the final place at the table was filled, and with it came the new feelings that resonated so deeply in his soul. The taste of wine and chocolate, the feeling of his own lips meeting another softer, gentler pair, and the sight of stars shining down on them through the trees in the meadow. Their meadow.